Hello, everyone. So, tonight's video is going to be a response to a comment that I received today. Somebody asked me a question about me being disillusioned with the church and homeschooling. So, I'll read to you guys the question, and then I will spend the rest of the video expressing myself, expressing what I believe, and giving my answer. So here's the question. I really want to ask you something, since you are now very disillusioned by both homeschooling and traditional Catholics. Do you now consider yourself Catholic or even Christian? This is a good question. And I'm glad that this person asked me this question because this has been something that has been on my mind for a long time. And it's been something that I've been talking about in these videos for a little bit now. And that is how I've changed. I wouldn't say that I have changed my beliefs. I would say my principles have always remained the same. But my mentality surrounding those principles have changed. My mentality has changed. My paradigm has changed. The way that I see things has changed. Um, the nuances of certain things have become more and more uh, close to my awareness. So when I first began studying Catholicism, I was very, very fascinated by the faith. And I'm still fascinated by it. I was very fascinated by what the church fathers had to say. I was never interested in the bureaucracy of the Catholic Church, but I was very fascinated with the spirituality of the church. And by the church, I don't mean Pope Francis and the bishops and the cardinals back in the Vatican. By the church, I'm talking about the 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 church militant on earth and its connection with the Zion up on high, the Zion in heaven, the heavenly Mount Zion, the saints in heaven, the holy men and women in heaven who are interceding for us. That is something that fascinated me and still fascinates me, still magnetizes my interest and my soul. I still believe in the militant spirit of Christianity. I still believe that we on this earth are called to fight against evil, to participate in the spiritual war against what St. Paul spoke about, the principalities of darkness. So, my criticism of the Catholic Church, or my criticism of quote unquote traditional Catholics, my criticism of the homeschooling movement is in accordance to my firm belief in Christian militancy. If we are going, and this has been my argument since I began blogging, if we are going to fight against evil, we have to fight against all forms of evil. And I have tried my best to combat all forms of evil. This is why I will criticize leftists and progressives in one video, and in another video, I will criticize trad Catholics and far rightists and fascists and homeschool maniacs. Because truly, 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 evil in its purest form, in its most deceptive form, comes with the face of goodness. looks like a lamb, speaks like a dragon, as we read in the book of Revelation. Looks like a lamb. It looks innocent, looks conservative, looks Christian, but it's evil. It's demonic. It's sinister. So I have become disillusioned with certain things, but not because I have rejected the church militant or I have rejected the call to combat evil, but because I have realized that certain things are evil. I have realized that certain things that I once thought were good are actually evil. So, yes, I have become disillusioned, not with my principles, but with certain groups and organizations and certain people who claim Catholicism or who claim Christianity. Now, the question asks, do I still consider myself Catholic? Yes, I do. I still believe in the intercession of saints. I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me shift the camera here a little bit. As you can see there, here, crucifix. Still believe in it. Still believe in the concept of icons. You can see right here there is a rosary hanging on the lampshade. I still believe in the intercession of saints. I still believe that the Virgin Mary can intercede for us. I still believe that icons are important to remind us who we are and our identities in the Christian faith. I still believe in the sacrament of confession. I still believe in the importance of all of these things. But at the same time, what I will insist upon is that we do not be naive as to the evil that is in the church. So, for example, and just this is a specific example as to what I mean by being disillusioned and how my mentality has changed. So when I first became Catholic, I would see a priest and I would think, "Oh, he's a priest. You know, I'm sure he's a good guy, or I'm sure he's a decent person." I would see a particular priest who was educated, who spoke Latin, knew some Greek, and could talk about the church fathers. That was Father Robert L. Kinsel, a priest that I once knew. He was a canon law judge. He was appointed by the Vatican to be a canon law judge. And he was a priest in the Diocese of Austin, Texas. Very educated. And when I spoke with him, I enjoyed having conversations with him. I enjoyed talking with Father Kinsel because he could talk about Catholic principles, he could talk about theology, he could talk about the church fathers. Very educated person, spoke Latin. He went to Italy every single year. And he told me, "Fyodor, you should come to Italy." And when he told me that, I wasn't thinking, "Oh, predator." I was thinking, "Oh, Father is going to Italy. The priest is going to Italy. And he is recommending that I go to Italy, and he could kind of be a tour guide for me. He could connect me with other priests. He could connect me with young Catholics." Because that was something that I really thirsted for at that time. I really wanted to meet young Catholics. Because when you meet Catholics, or when you meet Christians in general who are your age, it's very encouraging. And this is kind of a side issue, but it still connects with the theme of what I'm saying. When you walk into a church and everyone is old, or almost everyone is old, that's a sign of a decayed church. Because what it means is those people didn't really educate their children enough, and their children didn't educate their children, meaning the grandchildren of these elderly people, enough. And so it's a sign of a decayed church. And the older folks who go to these Catholic churches, they tend to be the types of people who are like, "Where's the church bulletin?" And they are very agitated and very annoying people to be around. But when you walk into a Catholic church and there's a lot of young people there and there's very vibrant young population, that's actually that's more than likely a sign of a healthy church. It means that the parents are involved, the grandparents are involved, the young people have an aspiration to participate in their faith, and you have young blood. You want young blood in any movement. You want young blood because the young people are going to be active. They're going to go to the streets. They're going to advance things. They're going to have aspirations. They're going to have goals and objectives, and they're going to be very vibrant. Whereas old people, they just want to pray the rosary and then go to sleep. Um, so I wanted to meet younger Catholics, and I wanted to hang out with the youth, and maybe, and my dream, and I still have this dream. It's very difficult, but I've always had this dream of networking with young Catholics, and really starting some sort of, I don't want to say a movement because I'm not that known, but I always wanted to start like a group of young people who would coordinate action. And by action, I mean confronting corrupt priests to their faces, and really moving forward a revolution in the Catholic Church. And that's never happened, and I don't really see it happening anytime soon. But that was my dream, and I really wanted to go to Italy. But when you go to a different country, it's never a good idea to go to a different country and not know anyone there. You always want to connect with someone in that country who knows the language, knows the people. And Father Kinsel seemed to be that type of guy. So I was like, yeah, I'd love to go to Italy. And one day I gave him a call, and I began to ask him about the agenda. Like, okay, when do you fly to Italy? What airline do you use, et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, when we go to Italy, we should share a room together. And I'm like, wait, what? And this was a guy who told me that he led tours. So the plan was, the plan wasn't supposed to be just me and Father Kinsel. It was Father Kinsel leading a whole group of Catholics, including myself. That was what he told me. That's what he told me what he does. This is what he told me as far as what he does in Italy goes. And this is what he described to me. He didn't say it was, he didn't say, oh, it's going to be just you and me. He said, I lead tours of Catholics. You should come to this group. And here he is saying, you and I should share a room. It's like, well, no, and I was disturbed by this. And it just became very obvious that this guy was bad news. And then I remember Googling Kinsel, and I found out in I think it was the Washington Post or Washington Times, this newspaper did an article about a priest who was a confirmed convicted pedophile. His name was Robert Hirdlicka, and Robert Hirdlicka was molesting children. He was found guilty of child molestation, and he was sentenced to prison. I don't remember how many years he was sentenced, but it was definitely it was definitely years, multiple years. And then when he got out of prison, he tried to go to Canada and start a charity for children. And once the Canadian government realized what he was up to, they deported him back to the United States. Before Hirdlicka went behind bars, though, and when it was quite obvious that Hirdlicka was going to be in prison, Kinsel actually sent an email to the authorities begging them not to put Hirdlicka in prison, but to put Hirdlicka in a Catholic rehabilitation center. Now, if you know anything about how the Catholic Church covers up for pedophiles, you will know that the Catholic Church does this very thing. It will take a priest and put him in a rehab center when he gets caught. This is what Kinsel wanted to do with Hirdlicka. So it was a confirmation to me that Kinsel was a predator and that he was covering up for an actual child molester. So I began to confront Kinsel, and him and I became enemies. And he was a very, very depraved person. Him and I, in one phone conversation, this was this was really our last phone conversation. I remember I brought up the gay agenda with him, and he told me, "Well, I worked at the Mother Teresa AIDS clinic or the AIDS center or whatever. And I worked with so many gay people, and I told those gay men that they should remain in what was it called? Uh, Monogamous relationships, and you should stay loyal to one man. And I was like, well, homosexuality is a sin, be it monogamous or polygamous, it doesn't matter. And he began to say, well, Thomas Aquinas taught, this is what he actually told me. He said, Thomas Aquinas taught that two men can and I know this is vulgar, but this is what he said, that two men can masturbate each other. Woo! Yeah, that I got goosebumps just thinking about it. And I said, well, that's depraved. I told him. I was like, that's wrong. And he's like, oh, Theodore, that's your opinion. Anyway, I gotta go. Ha ha ha. And he hangs up the phone. And then about 15 minutes later, I get an email from him telling me basically to keep my mouth shut and to keep my opinion to myself. And that sparked a series of emails back and forth with him and I arguing with each other. And then eventually I get an email from Kinsel saying, because he had this guy that was living with him, and I didn't know this until, and this is kind of a long story, but I went to a friend's house for dinner, and my friend went to the Catholic church, or attended at times the Catholic church that Kinsel served in. And this friend said, hey, Ted, you want to go to dinner? And I said, sure. And he said, Father, would you like to attend us? And Kinsel agreed. And Kinsel invites this random dude. And my friend did not invite this guy. My friend had no idea who this guy was. And Kinsel walks into my friend's house with this random stranger. And I'm like, who is this? And Kinsel said, oh, he lives with me. He cooks for me, And it just didn't seem right. The whole thing was so shady. And this guy, I'll just say his name was Michael. He was a big guy, big guy, very dark eyes, very scary looking dude, bald headed. He looked like the type of guy who would strangle you to death behind you as you were sitting in the front seat of a car. Like, he'd sit behind you while you were in the front seat of the car, and he would strangle you. Like, he looks like that type of guy. Like, he could be an assassin. Guy was very scary looking. Claimed that he was a police officer at one point, and then he also claimed that he was a martial arts instructor. And Kinsel sends me an email saying, my good friend Michael doesn't like what you're saying. Hint, hint, I'm threatening you. It was just creepy. The whole experience was creepy. The Catholic Church did absolutely nothing. Everyone tells me, oh, go to the bishops, go to the bishops, go to those people. They'll do something about it. I go to the bishops. I remember calling up the Archdiocese of Austin. And the thing about Catholic archdioceses is that they never pick up the phone. Even if you call them within working hours, they don't pick up the phone. And the reason for that is because the majority of the phone calls that they get are BS. The majority of the phone calls they get is something like, where is the church calendar? Can I get the church calendar? Why isn't Father Murray coming to Sunday Mass anymore? Where is he? So the diocese doesn't bother picking up the phone. And the way that you get them to actually call you is when you call up the archdiocese and you have an issue, when the voice message comes, you tell them what you want in the voice message. So when the beep is heard, tell them the problem. And so I remember I called up the archdiocese. Nobody picks up the phone. I hang it up. Then I think about it, and I'm like, what's going on? I got to do something about this. So then I get a phone call from the priest who works at the same church, or who worked at the same church. I don't know if he's there anymore, but he worked at the same church that Kinsel served in. And his name was Monsignor Sawyer. I forgot his first name, but Sawyer was his last name, Monsignor Sawyer. And he was a priest at a Maronite Lebanese church in Austin. And the reason why Kinsel served at the Maronite church as opposed to a regular Latin church is because he was actually barred from serving mass at in a Latin church for reasons that were never disclosed to the public. So he just went to the Maronite church because the Maronite church has its own jurisdiction. So I get a call from this Maronite priest, and he starts acting very salty with me, saying, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" Because I had sent him an entire research file that I spent a week on investigating Kinsel. And I said, here's all the evidence against Kinsel. Here are excerpts from the emails. Here's this article written from either from, I want to say the Washington Post or Washington Times, one of those publications. Here's all this evidence. Here's the evidence that he tried to cover up for a convicted pedophile. What are you going to do about this? And Sawyer is like, what are you doing? And da. Why are you doing this? He's just giving me all this crap. And I said, did you talk to Kinsel? And he said, yeah, I did. And I said, did you mention the fact that Kinsel covered up for a pedophile? And he's like, I didn't even bring it up. And I'm like, wait, you're a Monsignor. You're supposed to be the shepherd of the people. And you didn't even confront him on the fact that he tried to cover up for a convicted pedophile? And he's like, I don't like your attitude. I'm like, yeah, whatever, buddy. And I said, listen, I got a big website and I got a big ass mouth. So if you don't do something about this, I'm going to expose all of you. And he said, well, if you do that, you can expect a lawsuit. And I was like, yeah, whatever, buddy. And he's like, see you later. And he hung up the phone on me. Just hangs up, just like that. This is a priest, by the way. This is a priest yelling at me. Well, not yelling at me, but acting very condescending to me. So he was condescending me. He was threatening a lawsuit all of a sudden because I simply wanted to expose his guy. Now, these are people who are supposed to die for the truth. Priests are literally supposed to die for the truth. Jesus said, you have the shepherd and then you have the hireling. The shepherd will fight the wolves for his flock. The hireling runs away when the wolves come. In this case, we had a hireling who was with the damn wolves. So I was so angry. He hangs up the phone on me. I was so angry. I pick up the phone and I hit the numbers on the phone for the Archdiocese of Austin. Ring, 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 ring. Hello, you've reached the Diocese of Austin. We are not available to pick up the phone at the moment, but please leave your name and number and give us a short message, and we'll try to call you back. Burp! And I said, hello, my name is Theodore Schubot. I have been trying to inform you about a corrupt priest in your diocese. His name is Robert L. Kinsel, and he teaches all sorts of depraved things. He covered up for a pedophile. He is a predator. He is evil. And I said, if you do not do something about this guy, I will expose the diocese. I will expose Kinsel. I will expose the Maronite church priest. I will expose every one of you. I said, I got a big mouth and I got a big blog. So give me a call back if you want to deal with this. And I hung up the phone. 30 minutes later, I get a phone call. And it's from the Diocese of Austin. And I knew how to get their attention because I knew a guy, and I still interact with this person from time to time, but I knew a guy who was a journalist at for the Boston Archdiocese. And he told me, he said, the way to scare any diocese is to mention the fact that you are in the media. Nothing scares them more than bad publicity. Nothing. So I get a call, and it's from a spokesperson of theirs. I don't remember who he was. I don't remember who it was. I don't want to give any names that would be wrongly referenced. But this guy said, okay, what's the problem? And I explained everything to this guy. And he said, do you have any evidence to send me? And I said, I got a whole file. He said, send it to me. I immediately get on the computer, email him the file. And then I get a call back from them, and they said, can we have a meeting with you next week on Monday at I think it was on a Monday or something. And I said, sure, that's fine. The next morning at 10 a.m., I get a phone call from the Diocese of Austin. They said, can we meet tomorrow? And I said, sure, but why did you change your mind? Like, why do you want to have this meeting sooner? And he said, we further reviewed the evidence that you sent us, and we realized that this is serious, and we want to meet with you. And I said, okay, let's meet. Next morning, I go to Austin, and I meet with two men from they were representatives of the diocese. It was Deacon Ron Walker and Danny Garcia. And I spoke with Garcia and Walker for over 2 hours. Told them everything. And in the end of the meeting, Walker says, "So what do you like?" He looks at me and he says, "What do you want us to do about it?" And I'm like, "Why are you asking me that? Like, you should be telling me what you're gonna do about it." And he was like, "Well, what do you want us to do about it?" And I was like, "Well, since you're asking me, excommunication." He rolls his eyes at me. Why are you rolling your eyes? Well, we don't really do that anymore, Theodore, except for very serious situations. This isn't serious? So I was like, listen, this is like obviously a waste of time, but I hope you guys can do something about this. And we got up, and as we were leaving, I asked Walker, I said, can I get updates from you as to what you guys are doing in your investigation? And Walker looks at me and he says, call me in 30 days. Turns around, walks away like we're in a damn corporate meeting. And this is the Catholic Church. It's become a complete bureaucracy. Treats the lay people who actually want to do good like garbage. I don't want to say stupid. I don't want to disparage people, but it treats the people who are very naive like they're naive and wants them to remain naive, because the last thing that these higher ups in the Catholic Church want is for people to escape their naivety. And the people who actually have an awareness, or at least some awareness as to what is taking place, the Catholic Church, the bureaucrats in the Catholic Church, want those people to leave. In fact, they would rather have people like me join some non-denominational church than actually stay in the Catholic Church. The last thing that the Catholic Church wants is people like me. And I could have been a guy, like, I was so zealous. You have no idea. People have no idea, like, how enthusiastic, how exuberant I was for the faith. I was so full of hope and aspirations and goals that I would have continued to work in favor for the Catholic Church to the death. I am that kind of person. And it turned out that I was the last guy that they wanted to be in the Catholic Church. I was the last guy that they wanted. They don't want people like me. The Catholic Church does not want people like me. And if you are of a like mind, the Catholic Church does not want people like you either. So, going through these experiences, I realized that if I ever had to deal with something like this again, I would have to actually do something myself to get people's attention, as opposed to just going to the bishops. So one day I meet this priest, and this literally happened the year after the Kinsel incident. This priest was Monsignor Michael Yarbrough. And Michael Yarbrough says, well, if you ever would like to meet somewhere and talk about the Catholic faith or whatever, I'd be happy to do so. And I'm like, that's strange. And at this time, I had already developed a sense of incredulity and suspicion about certain priests, but I still had hope. My zeal and my exuberance and enthusiasm wasn't completely gone. So I remember Googling this guy's name the next day and finding this story from the San Antonio Express, because this guy was a priest in San Antonio. He died actually last year. He actually died from coronavirus. But he was, when he was alive, he was a scoundrel. And I Googled his name and I found this story about him sexually assaulting a young man who was mentally slow. So he took advantage of a young man who was basically like a Forrest Gump, and he got away with it. And this wasn't a rumor. Yarbrough himself confessed that he had done this to to the bishop, and even after it was realized that he did this, he was promoted to the position of Monsignor. So this was really a big scandal. And it turned out that years later, he had me on his crosshairs. So I thought to myself, should I just ignore his offer? Well, if I ignore his offer, he's going to try to prey on somebody else. And he's never going to learn his lesson. He's never going to think twice before he tries to prey on a young man. So I realized that I needed to confront him. And I needed to confront him in a way that he would always think twice to the day he dies. So I decided that I was going to confront him and get it on film. And that's exactly what I did. So I called him up and I said, I'll take your offer. Let's meet at a cafe. And he said, well, I prefer that we meet in my office. And that brought goosebumps to my arms, because when he sexually assaulted that young man, he did so in the office, and he did so after inviting this young man to his office. So I knew at that point what his intentions were. And I said, no, I prefer that we meet at a cafe. And I brought up some excuse like, well, it's near my job and it makes things easier. And he's like, okay, fine. So we met at the cafe and I confronted him. And I brought up the name of the young man that he assaulted, Hector Escalante. I can never forget that name. And I did it for Escalante. I did it as a form of justice for Escalante, because Hector Escalante was horribly treated by this priest. And this was a young man who truly believed in the Catholic Church. He was in the Catholic Church as a volunteer. He was volunteering his time because he truly believed in the cause of Catholicism, and he was scandalized by this priest. And all these Catholic priests are like, oh, the atheism is winning, and oh, well, how about you try to actually fix your own house, and maybe you can actually become a force for good against atheism. But I confronted Yarbrough. I got it on film. I put it on the internet. And you hear this opinion often that the bishops are corrupt, but the lay people are good. The lay people are decent people, but the bishops are corrupt. And I found out how false that opinion is after I posted this video. I got hundreds and hundreds of comments from Catholics with nothing but hatred. Nothing but hatred. And I gave the video to Church Militant, the Catholic studio led by Michael Voris, and they didn't want to touch it because you confronted a priest. Because after I confronted Yarbrough, a week later, you see, I know a little bit, I think we all know a little bit about the art of psychological terror, and I confronted him in the cafe, and I'm pretty sure he was hoping that I would just forget about him. And I waited a week, and then I went to his church. Haven't forgot about you, buddy. And I filmed him while he was standing in his church just to scare him, because I wanted to scare him. That was all I wanted to do. And I just wanted to let him know that I'm here. I wanted to let him know that not all of us are naive, that not all of us are simply easy victims who are vulnerable to his predatorial behavior. Not all of us are victims. Some of us are willing to fight back. And I was attacked by Catholics, lay people. So I became even more disillusioned. So when people ask me, Ted, why do you have these opinions? It's because of the experiences that I've had. And you could say, well, those are just your anecdotal experiences. Those don't necessarily represent the totality of everyone else's experiences. And that's true to an extent. But my experiences corroborate perfectly with the experiences of thousands upon thousands of other people, not just in the United States, but all across the world. I mean, from Mexico to Poland, people have been sexually assaulted and preyed upon by Catholic priests. And I was watching a little bit of a documentary yesterday on the sexual abuse scandal in Buffalo, New York, and how so many priests were part of this network. Dozens and dozens of priests were part of this network. So many priests. I don't know. I don't remember the exact number, but it was definitely a large number. It was a very substantial number. And the fact that the people in the upper echelons of power in the Buffalo diocese were involved, covering up for it. The priests who were molesting children or who were sexually assaulting youths, they were shifted around from diocese to diocese or from church to church to cover up for this nonsense, to cover up for this evil, I should say. And for me to not bring this up, that would be evil. And for Catholics not to want to confront this, that is evil. That is antichrist. That is contrary to Christianity. If we are going to be Christians, we have to confront this evil. So to answer your question, have I become disillusioned? Yes. My idealism has deteriorated almost completely. But have my principles changed? No. I have simply realized that the people that I looked up to, the institutions that I looked up to, was just not really healthy. And they weren't what I thought they were. That's all that's changed. I become disillusioned about those particular people or organizations or institutions. But my principles have not changed. They simply have fueled me to continue to expose and to combat the evils that I have always known were there and the evils that I previously didn't know were there, but now I am aware of. Remember Christ going into the temple and driving the thieves out. You could have thought, Jesus, have you become disillusioned with everything? That's what you would be asking him. The reality is that Jesus was aware of the evils that were happening in the temple, and he was aware of the fact that those evils needed to be purged. And so if we are going to be Christ-like, we must focus on the evils within. Even St. Paul said, I am more focused on the evils that are in the church than the evils that are outside the church. Because we have to cut the cancer out. We have to cut it out. If we are going to be the church militant, then we must be militant about the evils that are happening within the church. We cannot be silent on this. And we cannot be full of idealism and some vain fantasy that's not real. We have to focus on reality. Anyway, I've talked long enough. You guys have heard some theology. God bless.